going. Let everyone know that we're going to record the session. Thanks for taking the time to dial in. It's been a hot topic, and we hope to cover off a few things, not everything though, because it is a big topic. My name's Jason Mathers. I'm the area manager for Cricket Victoria's newly developed southeast area. And I'd like to introduce the team that are helping us tonight. We've got Will Rice, he's the competition support officer, and he'll be driving the technology and the slideshow. Darren Anderson's the competitions manager, and Paul Milo is the head of member services. And they'll be the main speakers and running the session tonight, providing information and answering questions. We'll also have a number of field force online as well. Not to mention the cricket manager for the Southeast, who was on at the start there, Emma Gallagher, and also the club officer, Alistair Burge. COVID's made us reflect on how we do things. CV is definitely no different. We've decided to present a few of these topics and webinars to give us the opportunity to reach as many people as we possibly can in these different times. As some of you are aware, we ran two for associations. We ran one for the country associations and the metro associations earlier in the week, and also CA ran a session similar to this one on Tuesday afternoon, which was well received also. In terms of returning to play in a COVID environment, whilst we've done a lot of work in this space over recent months and gained insights from various authorities, we're definitely no experts. We do, however, plan to share our thoughts, and hopefully some of the aspects raised will help with your own planning when it comes to returning to play cricket at some stage, hopefully in the very, very near future. We know that'll be slightly different, could be slightly different in regional and metro areas. So really, this is a two-way conversation. We really want to draw out the knowledge and the experience from people that are online today, and sharing ideas, and really using the message function. We really want it to be two-way. We already know you'll be doing a lot of things that we mentioned tonight, but if a couple of things come up tonight that ignite a conversation at club level, then we've deemed it probably a worthwhile opportunity. The goal of the seminars is to ensure you have the networks and resources you need to support your players and volunteers, your volunteers in particular. So that's sort of the way we're going to sort of attack these webinars. While we're meeting online today and across a variety of locations, and we've seen that on the chat, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of various lands from which we are all joining, and pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. A little bit of housekeeping. Please remain on mute during the session. Please keep your video off. I'll turn mine off once I finish talking. And questions are encouraged. As I said, it's really a two-way street. And the best webinars that we've run have been when people have been interacting and throwing in questions. We'll have staff, Emma and Alistair, looking at the questions, and if we don't answer them straight away, we will make some time at the end to answer the questions we don't get to. So we have made some time at the end to catch up. So don't worry too much if we don't get it. The session's being recorded, so any issues, please let us know after the session. Good luck, and I'll hand over to Paulie Milo.
Thanks, Jace. Appreciate that. And as Jace and Emma said, really appreciate everyone giving up an hour of your time, depending on where you are from out in the southeast. And obviously, we've got some from all over Victoria. It's probably a better night to be in than driving around on the streets, although we've been certainly getting used to being in due to lockdown. So we know that some will be in the stage 3 areas of Victoria and some will be in stage 4, but a lot of the things that we work through tonight will be similar across the board, and a little bit of a focus on where we are now and also where we're moving forward. But as Jace said, make sure that you put some questions through the chat. we'll certainly try and answer them as we're going. And if not, we can come back to those right at the end as well. So we've got a little bit of background on where we've got to until now, current status of play, knowing that we can't train and play at the moment. We'll talk a little bit about what that means from an exercise point of view and planning until lockdown eases up. But also then the three core topics that we want to cover is the financial impacts and things that clubs can do now, and also planning for the season ahead. As Jason said, a lot of clubs will already be having these conversations, and hopefully it just picks up on a couple of bits and pieces that you can take away. Training night, what that's going to look like, and also match day as well. And we'll sort of touch on the resources. The website that was up there before is a little bit of a one-stop shop. There's a couple of websites that we'll go through both at CV and CA level that'll have a lot of the information that we touch on tonight. But that's the core things that we wanted to touch on. So I might sort of kick it off with a little bit about the background and where we're at now. So what we've done as a sport, or I guess once the COVID crisis hit, all sports started to sort of look at what we needed to do. Sport Australia were quick in terms of their work, looking at both a high performance and also community cricket basis as well. So they put out, these are the protocols for high performance, which is what our state teams and our state squads are working through. So the use of the City Power Centre is under a high performance environment. It's a lot higher protocols that are required at community level. And then there was also community based requirements as well. We've seen the ICC come out with their own regulations for international cricket. And we'll talk about a little bit of the differences there, the way that they treat things like sweat and saliva on the ball. CA provided their own advice as well, which was significantly based on the Sport Australia work and their own medical expertise. And again, a lot of the protocols that are going to come out from Cricket Australia will be based on that medical expertise. So it's not relying on clubs to be medical experts. We've got people that have done that work to make that easier for all of us. We then, from a state point of view, needed to comply with the state government requirements and submitted a fairly lengthy online submission, as all sports needed to do. Those turned into return to train and play guidelines, which were housed then on the Vic Sport website. So pleasingly, the work we did at community and high performance level has been ticked off. So this certainly helps, and we'll touch on it later, about your engagement with people like council, that if you indicate that you're complying with the state sport association, so which is CV, if you're complying with the return to train and play, that might be enough for council to say, okay, yeah, we understand that your protocols are signed off, and that's okay. But we'll touch a little bit on what different councils might be requiring as well later. So we've then put forward the return to train and play document, which also has a one-page COVID officer guide. So that's on the home page of the Cricket Victoria website. So that's something that we certainly encourage clubs to check out. There has been 5 versions of us. The state government's kept us busy with all the changes that we've made. So we put together a version of that, and with every change that's been made, that has been changed. It obviously will change again once we're allowed to train and play. And things like whether or not we need to wear masks, or things like how many can be in group sizes, all those things will be what we monitor with the state government and update those regulations. The website's had a big overhaul over the last couple of months, knowing that things like webinars and access to the website's going to be critical. So that has had a bit of an update there. Just also quickly before I hand it over to Darren to start the presentation, the other things that we've done is check out the insurance in place to make sure that's in place, and pleasingly it is. What was known as JLT Sport is now Marsh. The insurance cover remains through the COVID environment as well. So we're meeting with the state government regularly, promoting the grants that a lot of the clubs online were successful for. There was about 700 clubs were successful for a $1,000 grant, and a lot of the associations were as well. running these workshops and working through the different protocols. So that's the key thing that I wanted to sort of touch on. Is a little bit of background. There's a lot of work done to get us to this point now. But I'll hand it over to Darren to run through the balance of the presentation. But make sure you ask some questions in the chat, and we'll try and get to them as we go.
Thanks, Paul, and good evening all. As Jason mentioned, last week we had over 120 representatives from Metro and Country Victoria join us for our association-specific webinars. Broadly speaking, we covered off on the following areas. Start dates. Technically, we could start on October 3rd as the start of cricket season, but then we would need to consider preparation time for turf wickets. So making sure you're checking with your local council about when work would commence, especially those in stage 4, because many of the ground staff have been stood down during this period. Adequate notice for players and officials before round 1, especially those with work plans who are shift workers, so they might need to make up hours. Adequate time for the players to prepare to avoid injury, especially bowlers and people that have been sitting on the couch for 6, 7, 8 weeks with limited physical activity, then going into match play. And then we were talking around perhaps that being three weeks notice being adequate, at a minimum, maybe 2. Our high performance feedback for Premier Cricket itself was a little bit longer, but we're mindful that this is community cricket. So we discussed that with associations. We also provided them with a bit of a document template that we use for Premier Cricket to help them with their preparations and allow them to be able to communicate with their clubs around start date proposals. So these will all vary based on the feedback we got from the associations, both Country and Metro, but we've recommended that they communicate and keep clubs in the loop as much as possible. We then spoke about match day protocols, and Cricket Australia have been working pretty closely with the states and getting learnings from the ECB with their community cricket around some guidelines and match day requirements that associations would need to consider, and Cricket Victoria would provide recommendations to associations so that it all looks the same across the state, and the associations were happy to be guided by Cricket Victoria on that. We'll go through a little bit about this in the match day slides, but these include stuff for players to be aware of, for umpires to be aware of, bowlers, match day setup, even scorers. So they're the sorts of things that we were discussing, and there's a few intricacies with all of that. But one of the questions that keeps coming up is around equipment sharing, and basically what we're being told is there's no sharing of equipment. Basically, protective equipment, gloves, pads, and helmets are designed to absorb sweat. So if other people are touching these items, they could be impacted, even back grips with gloves on, based on the medical advice we've been provided. We've also been given recommendations to avoid communal afternoon tea, which is something we do see a lot of in local cricket, or lunch. So players and umpires are being advised to bring their own food to games, and also their own drink bottles, or to purchase from the canteen or kiosk. Also for consideration that we put to associations was for perhaps to have matches bowled 5 overs from one end across all junior age levels to save on the players crossing paths, but also to save time, because a few of the protocols are around needing to stop the game every 6 to 10 overs to sanitise the ball, sanitise player hands, and that can add anywhere between 20 and 30 minutes to a game, which could then have impacts on senior cricket if juniors or coaches are then trying to get from games on Saturdays to their senior games. So we threw that one out there for associations to consider. Formats was another area we touched on, and this is an opportunity this year to try new things. This season's going to be nothing like we've experienced in the past, and hopefully it's like nothing we're going to experience in the future. So if we're going to have a shortened season, it's an opportunity for associations to look at new ways of playing the game, and one-day cricket, we think, is a priority. The benefits for one-day games mean that we can get some games in early, and if we need to stop for a third wave, we could have enough games played to constitute a season and start finals if we can get back playing. Also means that there's less need for preparation time for bowlers because they're bowling less overs in a day. We can get the opportunity for top order batters to face the top order bowlers more often, rather than situations that we saw in 2-day games where you might be an opening batsman or batter that that you field the first week, get washed out the second, you field the third week or the first week of the second game, and then you're not batting for a fourth week. So it gives more people the opportunity to bat, more people the opportunity to bowl. And then we also avoid the situation where one or multiple players within a team or a club are forced to isolate mid-match, and the requirements around adjudicating that and the issues around the season. The guidelines or the guidance we've been given is that those matches would be considered a draw, but there's an impact and flow on issues for second 11s and third 11s and fourth 11s if that was to happen in a first 11 match. We also threw out the idea of having shortened T20 competitions, whether that be midweek or on weekends, and that would be able to be like a 4 to 6 week season with finals, and it means that you can target those who potentially haven't played cricket for a number of years, and especially footballers or soccer players or netballers from winter codes that may just want to be able to play a bit of a short season without committing to the full year, and also without committing to the full requirements of 80 overs on a match day. We also provided information around the Department of Health and Human Services and how they'll ultimately have the say over what takes place, and with regards to close contacts and contact tracing, but we'll get into that a little bit later. And then we told the associations that they should start thinking about whether or not they need to have an EGM and bring all the clubs in if that's in their rules, should rule changes be required. Also, Woolworths Cricket Blast, we're still waiting on a bit more information, and that will come from the state government as to what impacts that will have in terms of group sizes. And once that comes through and we get a bit more information, we'll provide that to the clubs straight away, because we do know that that is something that hasn't really been focused on. It's been more the Saturday afternoon or the junior cricket, where the Woolworths Cricket Blast often attract large numbers of parents and participants as well, and therefore there will be an impact as to whether or not there are size numbers and size limits to those groups. What we'll do is we'll now jump into the three key areas that we're looking to talk about, being financial, training, and match day. One of the things that we think is a priority for all clubs is to ensure that the committee, the coaches, and the players understand that this won't be a normal year. Cricket in a pandemic will be a privilege, but we'll be doing a lot more onerous things to look at how we need to get the games being played. And it's going to look a lot different to normal for players and for volunteers. So not to expect a normal cricket season. This is going to be anything but normal. Jumping into the financial things, we really want clubs to think about how they're going to look, because cricket this year will have a large impact financially. The need for COVID equipment, and we'll touch on the Return to Cricket website, where you can get that around signage and sanitising. You need to speak with your council and school as soon as possible. School being if you're using school grounds, but council if you're using council grounds, to find out what their requirements are going to be. We're hearing some stories from councils that they're requiring clubs to clean after every use, whether that be match day, training. Some councils are doing the cleaning themselves, and other councils are saying it's just a wipe down of the key touch points. So please make sure you speak with your council as soon as possible to get an understanding of what their requirements are. And if available, it'd be great to have the COVID officer from within your club there with you when you do speak with the council, so they're across everything as well. You could look at potential new sponsors and tie them into equipment. So we had suggestions of sponsors sponsoring the sandwich boards, which promote the COVID requirements and guidelines. But then also looking at whether or not sponsors are purchasing cricket balls for training and those sorts of things. Even speak with your co-tenant about sharing costs, because no doubt they're going to be experiencing the same thing when the winter season rolls back around, whether that's excess sanitizer that might be left over at the end of the year, similar to what a lot of clubs do with alcohol and soft drink and food, sanitizer, and that might be a part of that changeover that takes place. Cash flow and budgets. There's probably going to need to be ongoing assessment for extra costs and more than likely reduced revenue. We're expecting that you won't be able to have as much in terms of off-field socialising sort of things this year with distancing and that. So being mindful of that, but potentially reduced subs from players, and some players may not be able to afford it, or they may opt not to play this season. And then the extra costs around being able to just get out on the park and play. Looking at ways to maximise your existing sponsors' promotion, whether that's social media, a sponsor-hosted webinar for members, sponsor sale rebates, direct membership, ground signage, apparel. Look at different ways that you can really look after your sponsors, because they will no doubt be doing it tough themselves. So ensuring that that partnership that you've got with them is ongoing, and you're looking after each other and really being part of that local community. Fundraising and grants, consider different options to the traditional ground events. Prioritise exploring grants, and keep an eye out for the upcoming round of community grassroots cricket grants from Cricket Australia, because there will be options and opportunities for clubs to access funding through there. Again, speak with your council. We're hearing stories of some local councils being able to provide grants for their local clubs around COVID expenses, and then other avenues to help out with playing costs and on-field costs. As I mentioned earlier, functions and social events. You may not be able to host your dinners and your big events and drinks, and consider liquor licensing with regards to drinking outside the change rooms, and ensuring that you're aware of your red line and the requirements around that, and whether or not you do need to look at a booth license, or if you've got a booth license as part of your liquor license, ensuring that you're following the requirements of that and not going outside the hours in which you're allowed to use that. After match, obviously, players like hanging around, so being mindful that may not be something that happens as much anymore. So consider those sorts of things. Apparel, do you really need new apparel this year? Extra player and family costs. You may get stuck with excess stuff, so think about that. Balls, you might also need extra training balls, but not stock for the full summer, just in case that the season gets cancelled. Talk to your local retailers. I know Kookaburra offer I think they're rejects or second balls, cheaper training balls, and potentially seeing that as an option as opposed to the more expensive balls. Player base options to consider. If you've got less players, they potentially can't afford it, they're worried about it, they might need to work on Saturdays, so they can't commit. You might need to look at considering midweek teams in a T20 comp, or having a Sunday team where the ones that can't play Saturday can play Sunday, or changing things up to what you would normally do. And then, yeah, as we mentioned earlier, a 6-week T20 comp, if the association wants it, really push your associations if there is a want and a need for that. So that way you might be able to attract new players who obviously might be from those football teams that didn't play. Player and coach payments, if the season's shorter, please make sure you do protect your club. Cricket Victoria have come up with a number of templates which are available on the Cricket Victoria website, so the clubs can access them and have a look at some samples and that around the wording to ensure that the club is protected with regards to any coach or player contracts and agreements that might be in place. And again, as we mentioned, because there's no sharing of playing equipment, it might be an opportunity for season loans if there's excess kit at the club rooms. I know a lot of career clubs still have kit for junior training and all that, and there might be a chance for you to lend that kit out to a player who may not be able to afford equipment or may not have the equipment. So what we'll ask is if there are any questions or any concerns and that, please put a comment in the chat function around finance. And what we'll do is we'll go through the next two areas, and then we'll circle back and address any questions that get put in that can't be answered with a response from the team. Looking at training, state government restrictions, currently stage 3 and stage 4 restrictions are in place. And we're not encouraging players to head to the nets under any circumstance. We don't want one-on-one sessions of throwdowns in the nets taking place as an option of training at the moment in their 1 hour in which they're allowed out. we want to make sure that we're avoiding that at all costs. Members of the community are going to dob people in. We've seen that. We've been told that the number of people in the community calling up the different channels and dobbing people in has been quite a fair bit. So knowing the local areas and that sort of thing, I'm sure the dog walkers or people walking through the park who spot people from career clubs doing the wrong thing will jump straight on the phone to either their local council, the police, or even the media. So make sure you're doing the right things as the government are requesting. When we do return, we may need to train in separate small groups, 5 or 10. We're not sure. We're waiting on the government to inform us of that. Indoor centres may not be an option, but that will probably be a cost-saving thing given the fact that the season may not start until later. Training on Saturday and Sunday will be easy without the football codes, and then there'll be extra weeks of daylight saving in pre-season before the season actually starts. As we mentioned earlier, talk to your council or school around the requirements and make sure you're well aware of that if there's going to be extra costs involved. Reducing an impact of a positive case by going in small group sessions fully separated from the others. Perhaps 1s and 3s on one night, 2s and 4s on a different night, and 5s and 6s if clubs have got that luxury, or just setting up staggered times for everyone. A lot of clubs really do that well with juniors, but it might need to be the case with seniors as well. Tracking who attends. Training is going to be important. Basically, we had an example of a rugby club, I think it was up in Queensland, who had a positive case, and because they'd been keeping a really good record of who had attended training and who was in specific groups, they were then able to provide that to the relevant authorities, and they were able to minimise the risk, and it was a really good example of what clubs really should be doing to ensure that they're keeping everyone safe and they're not having the spread of the virus go around. We'll touch on that a little bit later with a register that we've put together with an option for either manual or with QR codes. Minimising sharing of training balls. Clubs may need extra balls. Main bowlers may be able to keep their ball for the start of the season or have separate sets for Tuesdays and Thursdays to avoid the risk of contamination. Cleaning equipment, you may need to minimise the amount of training equipment that's used. I know some coaches like to go out there with all sorts of cones and stumps and apparatus where you might need to restrict that or at least wipe it down before and after every use. Venue access on a training night may be minimised, so maybe not necessarily opening up the full rooms on training nights, because it means you probably need to clean and therefore there's more cost and time going into it. So the message might be get in, train and get out. And then a number of questions have come through around masks and temperature checks. Masks will depend on the state government restrictions, but it's unlikely that bowlers and fielders would need to wear them, possibly for batters, unless they're doing run-throughs and all that sort of thing. We're not too sure, but we will be kind of keeping everyone in the loop of what's going on there once the government give us the information. Temperature checks for players and officials. If it's over 37.5 before training or match day, they aren't at the moment. Temperature checks aren't required through Cricket Australia's protocols, but it doesn't stop a club or association requiring this if you want to make sure that you're stopping a spread within your local club. So if there's any training related questions from people out there, whack them in the chat function. I may not have covered off on any information you're wanting to hear about that. So we'll come back to it once we finish the match day.
Darren, it's Paul. Yep. I'll just give you a bit of a break there. If we can go back to the previous slide, thanks, Will. Just as a reminder that I guess the cricket is happening over in England, so there will be some things to think about. But once it gets up and running, they will get into a bit of a rhythm. But it does need some thinking and some planning. So as Darren said, talk to your council, talk to your school. Do they have any protocols? Is there going to be any grounds that you can't use? It might be that a school says, no, we're not going to let you use the ground because of concerns. And just be sort of having those conversations now to understand what those cleaning protocols are. There will be information about the guides for training night and match days, which are already there at the moment. We're obviously going to be updating them based on state government advice as we go. So the key message for tonight is certainly don't panic. There's a lot of information to take on board, but as Darren said, it's just we need to sort of think about this season as it's a privilege and it could be taken away. And we want to protect cricket as much as we can. So the more that we can do, the better. But certainly from a training night point of view, I guess the message is prioritise matches as much as we can, because it might be that you can only train in groups of 5 or 10, and might be that someone can only train one night a week because you can't get through everyone because you want to keep everyone safe. But also volunteers at the club, they'll want to know that the club's got some good protocols in place as well. So some of these things are going to help to be able to give information to your volunteers as to how it can work as well. So there certainly is step-by-step guides to work through that we'll touch on. But the key sort of takeaway is to get in early, talk to your council, talk to your school, think about how your training nights might look a bit different. And we'll touch on the equipment that you can also purchase as well. So, yeah, just sort of give you a quick break there, Darren, and a bit of a recap on that slide.
Beauty, thank you. So what we'll do is we'll jump into match day, and this is where there'll be a lot of questions, no doubt. So basically, we'll confirm with associations the regulations and following the protocols that come out from Cricket Australia, which we're expecting any day now. However, they have given us some guidance around a few things to mention, so clubs are aware of. As we mentioned, clubs that need to check with their councils and that with regards to requirements. Players, frequent hand sanitising will be required. No sharing of equipment. The captain will be the person responsible for needing to wipe down the ball at regular intervals. Players will need to bring their own food and drinks or buy at the canteen. Bowlers will need to place their jumper or cap at a designated place when bowling. If not wearing it themselves, they will not be able to give it to umpires. So that will either be over the boundary, a designated spot on the ground, but they won't be able to give it to the umpires. Umpires are not to touch the ball or any clothing from players. They may be required to carry hand sanitizer to reduce the time of players going off the ground, which we're expecting to be every 6 or so overs. And they'll also be required to have either antibacterial wipes or another wipe that doesn't affect the ball. The coin toss will be done by umpires. They'll be the only ones to produce their own coin and toss the coin. So this year there won't be the captain in charge of the toss. Scorers. The ideal scenario will be that all clubs select their teams on MyCricket before play, and the same scorer scores the whole day, which would be best via rescoring. Where extra scorers are needed either for the iPad or the manual scorebook, the iPad and the pens that'll be wiped down before use by the next person, or someone can bring their own pen, especially for the lower 11s at community cricket. We know that you've usually got someone umpiring, someone padding up, and then 2 people scoring. So you'll need to ensure that everything's being wiped down beforehand. And one of the recommendations around that is the captain then takes a photo of the scorebook to send through to the person at the club who enters it into MyCricket if it is done manually. Volunteers will need to be aware of the cleaning duties and maintaining social distancing and wearing masks. Spectators will probably need to check in to the ground to assist with contact tracing, similar to what the players and officials will need to do. They'll also need to maintain social distance and basically that anyone that's at the ground, whether they're watching the game or walking around, could potentially report through to the council and the media about matches or clubs doing the wrong thing. Clubs should endeavour to have the general public not congregate near the players' areas or officials' areas, and at least adhere to the state government directions. If it's difficult to deal with, contact the council or police if it becomes a major concern, but the priority is the health and safety of the players and the volunteers within the community. At the venue, signage should be put in place, and probably consider how to best minimise access to the facility. Players may be asked to leave their bags either at their car, or it might be 2 metres apart from another bag. We're just working through all that sort of thing. Food and drink, again, no communal afternoon teas or lunch, and we're suggesting BYO drink bottles for players. After the match, this is the difficult one, because it's one of the things that a lot of people love enjoying, is 1.5 metre social distancing, minimising the number of people standing in groups. So the after-match session where the umpires and all the players get together, it's going to need to be reduced around the requirements set out by the government. Masks at this stage, based on the government regulations, you probably don't need it if you're participating on the field. So with the batting, bowling and fielding, but umpires, scorers, canteen, spectators and the batting team who are already out or waiting to bat would then need to be wearing masks during this time. If there are any questions around match day, I know it's the big area of concern, and there's a whole lot to it, which we will be providing guidelines and information following these sessions and to the associations. Please feel free to whack any questions again in the chat function, and what we'll do now is we'll just pause to answer any questions that may have come through.
I've been monitoring those as they go. So if a scorer has their own, could they bring it into the venue and do scoring in it? Special access rights to My Cricket can be given to him. Yeah, so if they've got, obviously if they've got their own, and bringing that in and do the scoring, yep, absolutely. So again, a lot of these. Sorry, we'll just sort of keep reading the questions as we go. Use of sweat on the ball back. Sweat was used by England's bowlers. Yep. So ICC regulations are different to what the Cricket Australia regulations are. So these will all come out in the match day protocols from Cricket Australia. So I guess the main takeaway from tonight is we've still got at least a couple of months before the cricket season gets underway. So it's not, don't panic too much about what the regulations on match day will be, but sweat and saliva can't be used in games in Australia. So that's different to what you'll see in test matches. And that's going to be a little bit tough. It's also probably a little bit tough about seeing AFL games, or for those that might, follow the rugby league, if they see AFL or rugby league, or see what they in the international matches, and they'll see it's different. AFL players don't need to sanitise their hands a couple of times a quarter, but we needed to go off and sanitise every 6 or 10 overs in local cricket. But they're obviously living in hubs and living in bubbles and getting tested regularly. So it's a different set of protocols. As I said at the start, there's high performance protocols and community protocols. The community protocols are based on understanding that it's run by volunteers, but it's also we're dealing with trying to prevent a deadly virus. So there's going to be some rigour around the stuff that we have to do to keep cricket going. But yeah, so the medical advice from Cricket Australia is sweat is likely to be less of a concern, but it's not an unrealistic that it could be a transmitter. It certainly hasn't been ruled out. So CA's perspective is that sweat can't be used as well.
Yeah, so just on that, so the Cricket got asked at Cricket Australia, and as they pointed out, that's the £17.5 million question. Basically, the protocols, the biosecurity that's been put in place around the test series over there means that the players are being tested, and therefore there's no need for worry about external people. As you see, they go and get the ball out of the crowd themselves. Same as the AFL, they're in hubs, so they're being tested twice a week, where in the community people can go to work midweek. They're able to go out and socialise once these restrictions come down to level 2 when we'd be playing. So therefore there's a higher risk with the sweat and the saliva.
David's question there about discouraging parents. it's one of those things we've always spent a lot of time encouraging parents and encouraging volunteers, and probably fortunately or unfortunately, there's a lot of games, especially junior level. There's not a lot of parents hang around compared to say some of the other codes, but it'll be based on government restrictions at the time. So there was a time when they were talking about you could only have one person going along to a game, and it was written up that grandparents were not allowed to watch. So it'll certainly be based on what the state government restrictions are. But if you do have, so at the most recent, before it went into lockdown, they were talking about groups of 10. Everyone maintaining a social distance, but not being in more than a group of 10. Certainly the junior games that I've been in over the years, there haven't been heaps of groups of 10 around. There might have been lucky to be a group of 10. But yeah, it'll be about maintaining social distance and whatever the state government restrictions are at the time.
I'll jump in now if you like. So just answering Jake, yeah, so we won't be able to return to play until level 2 restrictions. And if we have a look at the March March period where we went to lockdown, where we went to level 3, there were 3 phases where we then came out. We were still in level 2, but the option was still for winter competitions to get their season up and going, and some of them fell just short a week before we then went back to level 3. So level 2 at stage 1 of level 2 was where the ability for us to return to play was for winter. They may change that based on what we've experienced with this second wave, but that's what we're expecting. With regards to the bulk supplies, Mark, we'll get to that with the return to cricket, with the link that Emma's just put up there for the information. And with regards to Alex comment around the social distancing off the field, yeah, that is going to be tough, but it is going to be a requirement for clubs to undertake. And yeah, masks will be required off the field because that's what the government will be requiring us to do. So it is tough to have a look at other countries. MLB, they don't have their hubs, so every country is going to be very different with how they go about things, and we've just got to go off what our state government put in place and just carry through with that.
I'll jump in there, spot on there with the masks. Obviously, we're preempting. My guess would be that masks will be in all throughout summer. It'll be an element of government wanting business and wanting normality in life, but I can't see that they'll be relaxing the mask requirement. And again, there'll be protocols as to who needs to wear a mask when those rules are in place. And at the moment, you don't need to use a mask if you're exerting a lot of energy and you're going for a run. So our work that we've got with the state government is that would be on the basis of if you're actually on the field, batting, bowling and fielding, but everyone else, including spectators, again, that'll be based on state government requirements. Patrick had a comment there about financials, recommendation with financials only, credit card only. Certainly the cashless, I guess the cashless element is highly recommended, but again, that's it's not like cash has been outlawed, so that's still a requirement that we would recommend going down that path. And I think a lot of people are getting more used to that in society anyway. But the less cash transactions, it's just thinking about that's one extra little thing where a virus could be transmitted of handling cash, and you're obviously looking at your own volunteers as well as other people of the public as well. So certainly the recommendation for as much cashless as possible, and if the club wanted to go down the path of no cash at all, certainly the early advice to your clubs, to away clubs and your members, but I'm sure they'd also understand. But yeah, we're certainly encouraging that as well.
A few associations are also going through the cashless model for their umpires. So we've provided them with templates and ways for them to do that. So I know a couple of the community associations have done that. in the last few years, and based on the webinars that we had last week, a number of associations have asked us for that detail, which we've provided them, because they think they will go down that model as well, given the fact that majority of umpires fit into the highest risk category, and do have concerns about umpiring this year. So yeah.
I'll take it over then. So question, sort of probably a comment more about social distancing in fielding, wicket keepers standing up. So yeah, the natural game of cricket is that it's overwhelmingly socially distant. Yes, there might be a situation where the keeper's up to the stumps and they're within 1.5 meters of the batter, or you've got a first slip that's close to second slip. So there will be times where people are quite close, but it's a non-contact sport played on a large field. So, but other supposedly non-contact sports were deemed contact by the government because of the close proximity that they would have on a regular basis. So netball, basketball, soccer, those sort of sports were lumped into that category. But the protocols that are set down by the state government, they've signed off on cricket being non-contact. So if the state government sees non-contact sport can continue, it can continue as it normally is. You don't need to move players away or put cones down to where people can stand or anything. But there will be things like the image on that screen of high fives and things like that are, I guess, outside of the direct playing of the sport, are things that we're really going to be discouraging. There is, and I know Darren's put a question there about the sweat and saliva. There is guidelines there about whether it's deliberate or accidental, and they will be coming out from Cricket Australia soon, and we'll be sharing those through the VCCL and VMCU out to the association network. But yeah, there will be guidance there.
With regards to other states, Jake's question there, the only state that's playing at the moment is Northern Territory, and they haven't had a positive case in months. So they've been very, they haven't really had the protocols and requirements around for their season. The other states, New South Wales and Queensland are looking to start their season in a few weeks. However, they haven't had to implement the rules, but they're waiting on Cricket Australia's guidelines, and they'll then implement them as soon as possible. New South Wales were today put on hold, so their Premier season isn't starting until November. South Australia have delayed their season until the last weekend in October. WA are ahead of us, and they're starting early October with their season because they've had so few cases, and Tassie are delaying the start of their season until mid to late October for their Premier cricket. So they're the ones that we're trying to find out about.
Yep, and obviously, as Darren said, the ECB has had community cricket over there, and so we've got some learnings from that, plus some sort of winter code. Excuse me, some winter code in other states as well got up and running. So certainly the learnings are there, but the protocols have been put in place to indicate this is what is required for a game of cricket to play in a as safe as possible environment. And yeah, they're just having a look. Gareth there talking about associations paying the umpires, so the clubs are paying them directly. Do you want to take that one, Darren? I know you've done a bit of work there.
Yes, as I mentioned, the associations are looking at that payment directly to the umpires' bank accounts, which is what I know a lot of junior football and senior football leagues do, and a number of the metro cricket associations here have done. But basically, it's going to be up to each association. So I'd be getting in contact with your local association to find out what they're planning to do, whether or not it's them paying or the club's paying directly. However, I'd be a little bit reluctant with the clubs paying directly, because you need to sign off on honorarium and hobbyist forms for you to get that without having to pay tax. So I'd assume that if they're paying directly, it's from the associations, and then they just invoice the clubs for the costs. But yep, reach out to your local association for that. With regards to the overseas tours,
yeah, I was going to. Can I jump on that one, Daz? Just probably be a little bit careful with watching what happens on TV. It will certainly take learnings, but the ICC protocols are going to be different to what occurs at a local club in Melbourne and country Victoria. So certainly the protocols will be clear. Ultimately, the associations will need to adopt the proposed regulations that come out from our end, and there'll be clarity about how a training night happens and how a match day happens. But yeah, without sort of seeing what happens at Lords between Australia and England, it's probably going to be a very different look, similar to what local junior footy would be when you're comparing it to say watching the AFL as well. So yeah, that's probably going to be one hardship, similar to helmets in the past, in terms of those that have introduced mandatory use of helmets. Then you might watch Glenn Maxwell take his helmet off because he's batting in India because of the different requirements at an international level as well. But yeah, just sort of make a comment on that one.
We might keep moving, and we can circle back to any questions. I'm mindful of time, so we might move ahead now to the resources and links and that can be found. So the Cricket Victoria, the support and club associations areas where you'll be able to jump on and get information you need. I'll get one of the team members to put the link in the chat function so you can come back to that once we're finished and see the resources that are in there. But there's plenty of stuff and support in there for clubs and associations with that sort of stuff. If we then have a look at a few of the things that you might be able to find in the top left corner of this slide, you'll see that the current return to train and play guidelines that will continue to be updated, as Paul mentioned, as the changes with government restrictions come in. The top right is the one-page COVID officer guide, which is the final page of the CV guidelines document. So it's a bit of a role or a PD for the COVID officer, which we recommend that clubs should look at implementing within their setup and even associations as well. In the middle there, you'll see the link to the Cricket Australia Return to Play website with the range of resources that clubs should really look at purchasing. They've put this together with packs of signage, general health and hygiene, sanitisers, and individual things that clubs can purchase as well to help cover the costs. The Victorian state government had the $1,000 grants, which over 700 Victorian clubs were recipients of, and we recommend the clubs should look to utilise that funding towards this sort of stuff. Also reach out to your council and see if they have any grants available, and see if any new or existing sponsors want to jump in and support and put funding towards this sort of stuff. And as we mentioned earlier, keeping an eye out for the new round of community cricket grants. What I'll do is get one of the staff on the line to put up a link to show you what Frankston Peninsula Cricket Club have done with regards to signage that they got through the Return to Cricket website, and see how effective it is and what they were able to do with it in terms of promoting what they're doing. At the very bottom, in the bottom left, there's some Sport Australia documents. First of all, there's a manual attendance register template, and then in the bottom right, there's the COVID-19 safety plan. So your council may be happy with you simply confirming that your club will be adhering to the CV return to train and play guidelines that show them from our website, or they may require you to complete a COVID-19 safety plan. So again, that's where it's important to make contact with your local council to find out what is required. So make sure you jump on there and familiarise yourself with the information, especially the COVID-19 officer guide around the requirements of what would need to be done there. The next slide is something that we've been working on and we'll be doing for the Premier clubs, but it's the attendance register. So clubs can either choose to utilise a manual form or basically a spreadsheet which they fill out and keep track of, as highlighted on that previous page. But we've also looked to set up unique QR codes for people to sign in and out of our Premier clubs. So we utilise Microsoft Forms to create it for the competition, and as a resource we can provide example templates for clubs to access and create their own. You'll see there the example that we used for Geelong Cricket Club, and it might be worthwhile while we've got it up there is if you want to point your smartphone camera at the QR code, that will then take you straight through to the question that we've got there on the right, which would take about 20 to 30 seconds to answer, and you can see the example of that information. So it's vital for clubs to have a register like this, so that should someone test positive, the DHHS contact with you, you can then provide them with an accurate attendance data, so that they can make contact with the people that were there at the time of the person that tested positive, and they can then isolate. So we'll look at providing a template on our website and that for clubs to access and be able to do it themselves. Next website is Cricket Australia. So the community cricket website and their return to cricket stuff. So it's just community.cricket.com.au, and you'll be able to find a number of resources that Cricket Australia have done, and you'll also be able to access their upcoming webinars, which aren't necessarily dedicated to COVID, but they've got some really good club development stuff there. So it's a good resource to jump on and check out. And that really concludes a lot of the stuff I was wanting to present. But what I'll do is quickly throw over to Jason, who'll give you an update about the local area. And then once he's done that, we can then answer any further questions.
Thanks, Darren and Paul. I mean, a lot to go through, and there will be some sample rules coming from Cricket Australia, which associations will be able to adopt or amend or change, but there will be some sample rules which you can add to your current association rules. The region contacts, the way we're set up there has been a few changes at Cricket Victoria, as most of you, or most of the associations are aware of. We've done a bit of a meet and greet and discussion on how we've restructured, and you've got the Northwest Country there with Ben DeRouge, Tony Cack and Jacob DeRouge. The Southwest there, which has a bit of country and a bit of metro with Chris Harris, Dan Trevelyan and Carl Main. You've also got that little blue patch there at the East Metro, small area but lots of population. That's Clint Kennan, Stephen Box and Sharon Linus. And of course today, the Southeast area, which encompasses 4 regions, which we have Facebook pages for, and we'll be sharing all this sort of up-to-date information and links through those Facebook pages, through the Southeast Country Sharks, the Gippsland page as well, also the Southern Metro and also Southeast Metro pages as well. So that's myself, Jason May. There's Emma Gallagher is the cricket manager, and Alistair Burge is the cricket officer. So we'll be working very closely with your associations and clubs in trying to get this information out as quick as we possibly can, and working with clubs and associations to get cricket going across the area. The next slide, we've got also the coach and talent specialists, referred to as the CATs. The one that deals with our area is Guy McKenna, but he also does the inner southeast, so one of the regions in the East Metro as well. So he'll be working closely and with us and associations, and looking to run a lot of coach accreditation and offering coaching courses and upskilling coaches online. There's already been a few of those done already. Also in the other areas, you've got Shane Coop there and also Tommy Evans. So pretty experienced coach and talent specialists we've got across the state at the moment. All right. Additionally, we have also in at head office, which Paul Milo is the head of member services, who's done a great job today, and he's got a team in their competitions management with Darren Anderson and Will Rice. Their focus is on field. You can see there some of the stuff that they're looking at. They run Premier Cricket, men and women's, and also looking to help community clubs and with playing rules and conditions and fixtures and finals by setting some examples. By no means do you have to copy exactly what Premier Cricket do, but it's a fantastic guide and you can adjust it for community cricket, and it's always a good starting point. There's also the off-field stuff with Joshy Beaumont and Arvin Shures. They do a lot in dealing with the peak bodies of VCCL and the VMCU, working very closely with the field force, as shown before, on things like member protection, child safety, club development, e-scoring, insurance, my cricket, a lot of those things that all clubs and associations need support with. And we've also got association and club support in participation with Owen Hill and Rowan Akhtar, sustainable participation, leadership in, supporting clubs in increasing sustainable participation with strategies, diversifying our playing stocks, and really looking to support through Woolworths Cricket Blast and schools, diversity, inclusion, and the likes there as well. So plenty of support in at head office as well. I'll hand over to Emma Gallagher to go through the next slide 19.
I'm conscious we've ticked over the 8:30 mark, so I'll just basically say this. We've had a couple of other webinars that we've already run. The recordings are up on the Cricket Victoria website, along with supporting resources. Two really important ones, particularly in relation to this topic. So definitely go and check them out if you haven't already.
We've got a few webinars coming up in the next few weeks. So as Emma mentioned, jump on the website that we've just uploaded into the chat area, and you'll be able to see more information around what's coming up.
Any final questions, send them through either of the team. You can find our contacts on the Cricket Victoria website. So please don't hesitate to send us an email or get in contact with us, and we'll hopefully point you in the right direction. Everyone that's registered tonight will receive an email with some information and links. Is that right, Darren?
Yeah, that's correct. We'll send information out next week once we've completed all of the webinars tomorrow and Friday, with any information that may come up out of those sessions as well as some of the resources and the survey that's been updated there.
All right. Thanks very much. We really thank you for your time. Thank Darren and Paul for their expertise, and we look forward to getting cricket going. And thanks very much. And we'll hopefully keep an eye for any future webinars and changes to stages and conditions, and we'll be endeavour to get that information out as quick as we possibly can. So thanks very much, and we'll see you at the next webinar.
Thanks all.
Thanks everyone.